Welcome back. We're talking about the upcoming legislative session with Florida House Speaker Richard Corcoran. We were talking about the effects of Hurricane Irma. I just want to wrap up a couple of things on it. One, there have been a number of Puerto Ricans who have moved to Florida. Should Florida be welcoming and inviting of them? And two, should the state be helping them financially resettle here in Florida?
I don't think, I mean, first of all, they're American citizens, so whether they come from Alabama, Georgia, Houston, Texas or Louisiana or Puerto Rico, they come. There's programs already in place that help people relocate and deal with disasters. We have them now across, the bulk of our nation, whether it's fires, forest fires in California, hurricanes in Florida, what have you, tornadoes. And so anybody that relocates that's an American citizen is availed those benefits to get them back on their feet and try to help them recover as fast as possible. And so, yeah, we should. They're American citizens. That's an easy answer.
The other part of the hurricane, which we saw, was the deaths, the nursing home deaths. You alluded to it before. I talked about at the top of the show. I want to, before I get your comments about what the legislature might do in terms of nursing home reform and what the possibilities are, I want to play you a bit of sound that came from a congressional hearing that was held down here earlier this year, in which former state senator, former state representative Eleanor Sobel talked about her efforts when she was in the legislature to get nursing home reform. Let's play that sound.
The history of the Florida legislature and the influence of special interests tells us why Florida is in this crisis mode. Reviewing the disaster that happened in the Hollywood Hills Rehab Center, this tragedy was predictable, waiting to happen. In 1998, when I was a freshman in the Florida House and I was a roommate of Congresswoman Wilson at the time, I introduced a bill to require ALFs to have air conditioning in their facilities. Imagine that, air conditioning in Florida. I was met with fierce opposition by an organized, powerful industry and called obscene names beginning with the letter F. I was told shade trees and fans would be acceptable, that seniors were often cold and did not need air conditioning. Eventually, the law passed in 2000 requiring merely cooling devices, and that's what's in the Florida statutes today.
That's her bit of wisdom. I want to ask you a sort of a two-part question. One, how powerful is the nursing home lobby in Tallahassee? And two, realistically, what kind of reforms can we expect?
Well, first I'd say to your questions, one is I know Representative Sobel very well. I've worked with her on some nursing home reform before she was in the Senate, when she was in the Senate, and we passed significant reform. How powerful? The only way a lobby or a group or a special interest is powerful if we, the elected officials, give them that power. We should never give them that power. Do elected officials give them that power? Yeah, every day. I don't think we've done that at all in Tallahassee. And the reforms are going to be significant. Then first, to her point on Hollywood Hills, that's criminal behavior. That's already been established as criminal behavior. You can't, legislate against not just stupid, but against corrupt, illegal behavior.
Now, there's been no charges, no criminal charges have been filed in that.
The question is now, the question in that case, where there's absolutely needless cause of death for those individuals, the only question now is who gets arrested. They've already established it was criminal behavior. Now they're trying to decide, okay, let's go in there and figure out who do we arrest. If you look at the facts, you look at the scenarios, all they were doing for the most pernicious reasons against the sanctity of human life was looking for bottom line dollars.
But the state did not require them to have a backup generator. The state does not even require them to have an air conditioning system.
The state requires them to take all necessary action that is prudent for the safety of their residents.
But if it doesn't spell it out, then it's not going to happen.
If it doesn't spell it out, they're going to get arrested and they're going to be convicted and they're going to go to jail.
So should it be spelled out in the law?
Yeah, we're working on that. I told you we have a hurricane select committee. One of the big things that we're looking at is what are the things that we can do to bring about greater safety to the nursing home industry. Keep in mind how many senior citizens we have, whether it's ALFs or nursing homes, and we had an isolated incident at one Hollywood Hills home where it was an egregious criminal behavior. I think as a whole, as a state, against the other 50 states, I think we match up as #1 in terms of how we take care of and cover our elderly.
Should FPL by law be required to place nursing homes on the priority 1 list for turning their power back on?
Yes, but keep in mind that's
so you would support that in a bill?
Absolutely, but I want people to understand that the wrestle that goes on about that is there's already a list. You know, and so when you look at that list, and on that list are the frailest of the frail, adding them onto it is an appropriate behavior. But you have people who are in serious need in hospitals. You have people who are handicapped or severely handicapped, blind. You go through that list; they're all necessary. And obviously, in a serious hurricane with 48 whatever 72 hours of
Bell Harbor had their power back on before the nursing home, though. That's not a priority list.
Hey, this nursing home was across the street from a hospital with similar ownership. Everything they did was criminal behavior, and they're going to be held in account, and they should be.
I want to try to hit on a couple other things. You've made sanctuary cities an issue. You've promoted it as something. You recently wrote an op-ed here. You know, you're talking. One of the things that you wrote, you again talk about the 2015 case of Kate Steinle, who was murdered in San Francisco, and you make it clear. If you're wondering whether or not that could happen in Florida, my response is simple: not on my watch. And you're making this bold stand to say that you will prevent sanctuary cities and outlaw sanctuary cities. My question to you is, name me a single sanctuary city in the state of Florida, a single police agency in the state of Florida that is not cooperating with the federal government, a single county in the 67 counties in Florida. This is a law that has there's nothing to correct. There are no sanctuary cities in Florida. What are you doing? Are you just grandstanding?
No. Well, first of all, I'd say that's not true.
What cities?
I'm going to get to it. You got to let me finish.
Okay.
Right now in St. Petersburg, we have a mayor. I know Mayor Kreisman. Did he use the term sanctuary city? He said no, but for any illegal immigrant, his city is a sanctuary for them, and they can come. And in June of this last year, we had a illegal kill a taxi cab driver in St. Petersburg that's currently being investigated. It's a problem in the state of Florida, but the bigger question is this: it's not just sanctuary cities. You don't get wrapped around an axle about the underlying issue. The underlying issue, which I talk about at length, is the rule of law. If you do not have a well-established rule of law that is just and true, which is the single most important factor to making us the greatest democratic experiment in the history of mankind, is our rule of law. And when that is sacrificed, I don't care what the underlying issue is, you jeopardize the fabric of a society moving forward for the next generation. And that's unacceptable, and that should be fought every step of the way.
All right, so...
And I can give you another example, Jim, just to your point, just to make my point that it's not the underlying issue. We have a newly elected state attorney in Central Florida who's decided all on her own that the death penalty laws that the people have voted in...
That's not a sanctuary cities issue.
No, this is my point, that my point is it's about rule of law.
Right.
And even in that case, with her, I have called for her removal. She should be, if you cannot be an elected official, hold up your hand and say, I will fight for the Constitution, uphold the rule of law, and you routinely violate it because you think you know better somehow, that person should be removed from office. They don't deserve the honor.
All right, so if we want to protect the lives of Floridians in the state of Florida, let's talk about Senate Bill 456 or Senate Bill 196, which would ban bump stocks, that device that was used to create weapons and to turn them into automatic gunfire weapons that we saw in Las Vegas. Do you support an effort to ban those?
No, what I support...
You don't support banning those?
No, let me finish. No, my point is, what I support is we have a legislative process. That bump stock issue is going to come up. There's going to be a gun legislation from the left. There'll be gun legislation from the right. The bump stock issue will be widely debated. We'll be able to get all that information, research it.
But your position is, what's your position on it?
Right now, I think that we need more information for the legislature to make the decision. But the information that I have right now, I don't think that's the issue. Listen, it's not guns. It's not fertilizer. It's not trucks. Those aren't the problems. It's psychotic people with evil in their heart.
Okay, so let's talk about psychotic people. Senator Audrey Gibson has a bill that would allow for, and there's a companion bill in the House that would allow for family members of people who are mentally ill to petition the court to take guns away from them. And it would allow the police department, essentially it's almost like a Baker Act for guns. Would you support a measure in which a judge was able to rule that an individual was not mentally competent to possess firearms and have those guns taken away for up to a year?
Again, I'll look at that legislation. We addressed something very similar to that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, dealing with mental illness and guns. So I don't know how hers differentiates from that in terms of the Baker Act, but we'll be glad to look at it.
So you would be in favor of legislation that prevents mentally ill individuals or people who are suspected of mental illness of possessing firearms?
The process always has to be just and fair.
All right. Florida Department of Environmental Protection said a significant, issued a ruling that said there should not be drilling for oil in the Everglades. There was a proposal to drill for oil just 6 miles west of Miramar. Florida Department of Environmental Protection get that right?
I haven't seen the specific ruling, but I've been a long advocate for protecting the pristine nature of the state of Florida.
All right, you wanna get rid of eliminate PIP, the mandatory personal injury protection. Tell me why.
Because it's a no-fault system. I don't care where it is, anywhere in society. Even in divorce, when you tell someone that they can go out and one side can engage in egregious behavior, but because we have a no-fault system, that all of the behavior is ignored and we don't worry about it, and you just hand over people checks for $10,000, it's causing our auto insurance rates to rise. And so that needs to be addressed. And people ought to have legitimate coverages to protect their bodily injury. And
so you in favor of mandatory bodily injury coverage?
Yes. It's a far better system. Take the PIP, get rid of the free $10,000 that is driving up our insurance rates, has created cottage industries up and down our state of people getting barely grazed to the point that there's no even physical damage to their auto, but then they're going and getting whatever treatments they get so they use up their $10,000, and you and I are paying for it, or whoever else is not engaged in that behavior is paying for it.
Mandatory bodily injury could also raise rates.
No, I think that the important thing that we're looking at is to make sure that when you move from a PIP system that's costing us, millions and millions of dollars spread across all auto owner insurance payers, and moving to a mandatory BI, that you get a rate reduction. And I think that's going to, if we can get a aggregate rate reduction and move to a system that is sane and normal and common sense, then the people of the state of Florida benefit.
You're also supporting a bill that says that if you get bullied in school, you get a voucher to go to a private school. Is there anything you won't give a voucher for?
Well, let's again, sometimes these questions, I just don't understand where they even come from. So I'm just taking it, Jim.
But is it not?
Let me return a question. Sure. You're telling me you're okay with a young girl or a young boy going to school, being physically or sexually assaulted, and they have to stay in there and shouldn't be given...
Sexual assault is different than being bullied.
No. There's of the 50,000 reported incidents, only about 5,000 relate to bullying or non-physical violence. The rest are fighting, punching, sexual assault, sexual harassment. It's physical pain and torture for those children. So now we're going to worry. We're going to worry that we have a child who is suffering. You should read these stories.
Well,
who's suffering from PTSD.
So remove the child, but what about the underlying problem? Shouldn't you be dealing with the underlying problem of the person who's doing the bullying, who's doing the assaulting, who's doing the sexual assaulting?
Yes, and we do. We have a code of conduct. That code of conduct needs to be worked better by our schools. But in the meantime, while they figure that little thing out, let's take that child that we've promised to give an education, who's suffering from PTSD because he's getting his backside kicked every day, and put him in an environment that is safe so he can learn and get an education. I don't even understand why people oppose this. I really don't.
Well, it's taking more money from public schools to give them to private schools.
No, it's not. Every single study that's out there, whether it's a Harvard conservative or a liberal or a Stanford conservative, every single study has shown that where you have these programs, the rising tide raises all ships. Of the 100,000 kids on the corporate tax scholarship program, 40% more likely to go to college, and they're all poor, single parents, 70% minority.
Mr. Speaker, it's always fun having you come in and debate these issues. Please let me know next time you're in town. We'll have you back on again.
Thanks, Jim.
We'll be right back after the break.